making the attorneys not just improving the way that they work, but also making them happier and introducing a little bit more balance in their lives is also incredibly important to me. I think anything that we can do to improve the way that they work so that they're able to, for example, spend some more time with their family or get more sleep instead of having to stay up until 3 a.m. to do something that perhaps could be automated, that to me is a success as well.
Today on LawNext, a conversation with Nicola Shaver, Managing Director, Innovation and Knowledge at the law firm Paul Hastings. Just a few days before we're recording this, the International Legal Technology Association honored Nikki with its Distinguished Peer Award for Innovative Leader of the Year. And not only that, but her firm also won a Distinguished Peer Award as Innovator of the Year. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. And before we begin, let me just take 1 second to recognize our top supporter on Patreon, Alan Rodriguez, founder of 1-400, the digital innovation and marketing company for the legal industry. And you can find out more about them at 1400.com. That's the word 1 and the numbers 400.com. And if you're interested in supporting this program on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/lawnext. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment. But first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. Nikki Shaver, welcome to LawNext.
Bob Ambrogi, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm delighted to have you, and I'm particularly delighted to be able to have you after you've been recognized by your peers in the industry just a few days ago. It's quite an honor. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I feel really delighted and have been receiving many messages of congratulations from across the world, which is a wonderful thing. I will say, of course, that awards like this really belong to everyone in the team. Particularly the award to Paul Hastings is a recognition of the work that everyone in our department and across the firm has done. And that in particular feels rewarding because, as you will know well, Bob, given your podcast, none of these things happen in isolation.
Right. And that the award to the firm, and in fact, also expressly mentions by name two of your colleagues, Amy Wegener and Cassie Verdevec. I may have mangled their names, but...
You did not. You did very well. Yes, okay. Amy is our Chief Practice Innovation Officer, and Cassie is the other Managing Director in our department. Her remit is around practice management, matter management, legal project management, alternative timekeepers. So her area of the department is distinct from mine, which is innovation and knowledge, but we're a very matrix department, and there is enormous collaboration that occurs across all of the functions in the department, which is one of the things that I think has led to some substantial successes at the firm.
Just for the benefit of our listeners who may not be familiar with the award, the award, the Innovative Leader of the Year award, the one that went to you personally, according to ILTA, is intended to recognize, quote, an outstanding achievement by an individual maximizing the value of an innovative technology in support of legal professionals. And similarly, the Innovator of the Year award that goes to the firm is recognized as outstanding achievement by a law firm or legal department in maximizing the value of an innovative technology in support of legal professionals. And what strikes me as particularly interesting about your being the recipient of this award is that, just 6 years ago, you were not in this field at all, pretty much. You were practicing law on the other side of the globe. How did you get from being a lawyer in Australia to getting involved in working in knowledge and innovation in the United States?
It's a good question. I am by nature quite international. So I actually grew up in Europe, but my mum's Canadian, my dad's Australian. And I was a lawyer in Australia for about 9 years. I was a litigator. And then I worked in-house with media companies. I was really focused on defamation litigation. But
I don't know if you know that I do media law in my day job. So
there you go.
Yep.
Synergy. Yes. Yep. I find it fascinating and I loved it. I really did. But we made a decision as a family to move to Canada, which is one of the countries where I'm from, in order to be closer to family, certain parts of our family, when we had small kids and my brother was having small children. And we very naively, I think, assumed that we could move to Canada and just easily walk into jobs as people who had solid professional histories and qualifications. And I knew that I would have to requalify as a lawyer in Canada, which takes some time. What I didn't realize is that Canada makes it quite difficult for people to come in and work in a law firm in a different capacity while they are requalifying. And I effectively found myself in knowledge management by accident when I was looking for any other job in a law firm that I could do in the meantime as a mother of small children who needed to provide for her family. And I got a contract position with a firm in Canada called Blake's, which is a very good firm. And within a very small amount of time, I realized that the work in knowledge management, which is what it was called there at the time, is something that I really enjoyed. But really what I was doing is what we know as legal innovation in other contexts. So I was working with enterprise search and applying metadata to documents to drive them to certain positions on the intranet. Very quickly, I moved to another firm to cover a maternity position as assistant director. And I met Andrea Alliston, who is the head of knowledge management at Stikeman Elliott, who asked me then to apply for a permanent role that she had coming up, which was as director. And I just realized that I had found something that I loved to do. I really enjoyed the fact that as someone working in legal innovation within a firm, you are helping lawyers practice better. You're helping them find what they need easier. And I just really, in particular, enjoyed the technical aspects, which is not something that as a lawyer I ever realized that I would enjoy. But I absolutely fell in love with technology and the logic of it and could see the value and the opportunities that lie within the application of technology to the law. And I guess that's how I found myself where I am today. After about 3.5 years at Stikeman Elliott, an opportunity came up in New York for a global position, which sounded fascinating to me. And we moved the whole family to New York. We've always been a family that goes where the opportunity lies. And that's how I found myself at Paul Hastings.
That's fantastic. It's great that you found an interest in it and were able to continue to develop and thrive. I love your LinkedIn bio starts by describing yourself as dedicated to future-proofing law firms and accelerating the pace of positive change in the legal industry. So when I'm sure that what you do has a very specific definition and meaning in your mind, but the word innovation is talked about so much in law and in so many different kinds of contexts. I wondered what it means to you. How do you think about it?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question, because it's one that I raise often, which is that innovation in and of itself means almost nothing because it can mean everything.
Right.
And in any environment where what you're doing is driving innovation, the first step is to define what innovation means. To me, innovation within our law firm means improving the way that we do things, doing things differently for a better outcome. It's as simple as that. And doing things differently does not have to mean you apply technology to every problem. It means you identify problems, and then through working with the people who are suffering from those problems, you identify the best way to improve on it and provide a solution. And that can be through improving processes. It can be through staffing matters in a different way, pricing matters in a different way. It can be through using data and technology to improve and automate services. So I think it manifests in many different ways, innovation. But what you want, of course, as an outcome is an improvement on the way that we practice law and the services that we provide to our clients.
And does it matter who that outcome is for? Is it a better outcome for the attorneys in the firm, for the client? Is it all of the above?
To me, it's all of the above. Improving the way that our lawyers practice has the flow-on effect, or it should, of improving the services and the efficiency of the services that is provided to clients. But we now increasingly do client-facing work within our department as well. And in fact, we're formalizing that because so much client-facing innovation consulting effectively has arisen over the past year or so that it makes sense now to formalize that as its own chargeable aspect of the business. But really making the attorneys not just improving the way that they work, but also making them happier and introducing a little bit more balance in their lives is also incredibly important to me. I think we work in an industry that is rife with mental illness and addiction problems. And some of that is to do with the very traditional model that many firms still impose upon their attorneys, which has been shaken significantly by COVID, I will say. But anything that we can do to improve the way that they work so that they're able to, for example, spend some more time with their family or get more sleep instead of having to stay up until 3 a.m. to do something that perhaps could be automated, that to me is a success as well.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. Now, let's get back to this week's interview. You mentioned earlier, and I guess it's obvious from the award to the firm, that this is that the award to the firm is attributable to a team of people, not just to yourself. But you talked about how you think about innovation. Does the firm think about innovation in the same way? What is the sort of the firm's culture or attitude around innovation?
The firm is incredibly supportive of what we do as a department, but I will also say we have one of the 3 prongs of our brand is innovation. In that particular context, what is meant by innovation is a little bit differently than what I just enunciated. Mm-hmm. Really, in that case, what they're talking about and what we're talking about is innovation in the way that law is applied. So creativity in the bespoke work that our lawyers do, which I think is important as well. In fact, I think that if you can get lawyers to understand that a lot of what they do is inherently innovative, they're less likely to shy away from the word when you use it in a different way to also mean modernizing legal practice, for example. But in terms of what we do, Bob, the firm really has rallied around and supported us. They believe what we do is incredibly important. We have, as a department, a partner advisory committee of partners who support and lend their backing to a lot of our initiatives. We also have, for example, and this is something that doesn't happen unless firm leadership approves it, we have a billable hours credit program that allows associates to do work on a lot of our projects and get credit from their billable hours for that innovation work, whether that's helping on a pilot of a new technology or working with us on implementing new technology or on improving processes through a process mapping exercise. Those hours are available to our associates. So to me, that's a real indication of the extent to which the firm stands behind what we do.
Yeah, that's fantastic that they do that. On the other hand, have you encountered, either where you are now or in past positions, resistance to innovation or fear of innovation by legal professionals? And if so, how have you addressed that?
Absolutely. I think I was actually just talking to some friends about this yesterday. The type of work that we do internally, it sounds perhaps fantastic when you're speaking about it on a podcast or when you're talking about it in the context of an award.
It does.
It's really it's quite difficult work. And the reason for that is people don't love change generally. So it's great to have support and backing from the firm. But on a day-to-day basis, driving change across any kind of environment, but perhaps particularly a more traditional legal commercial environment, is really difficult. People don't want to pause in their billable work in order to learn how to do something differently. That doesn't come naturally, and it's not what they were trained to do or think about when they were at law school necessarily. There are definitely pockets of resistance. There are a number of ways to deal with that. One is you find your change agents across the firm and you work with those people, and you get this groundswell of support, not just from the top down, but from the bottom up as well. Because when you have successes with those people, it's much easier to use those successes as ways to encourage others to similarly try new methods. But one thing I did as well with my team is actually institute a 12-week change management program where I had become certified in change management and realized that these were tools that we all needed. I think one mistake in a way that a lot of KM or innovation teams make internally is we often hire from legal. And the reason for that is clear. It's because lawyers like, respect, and trust other lawyers. It's a psychological phenomenon, likes like. And so we hire lawyers for jobs, and then we ask them to not just manage content anymore, but also to employ new technologies, promote new technologies, orchestrate pilots, talk to people about the way that new processes work. And I'm not sure why we expect people whose background is purely legal to be able to just get going with that kind of work, which is fundamentally different from what you do as a lawyer without any additional training. So I created a change management program along with a friend of mine who is a communications consultant, and we rolled it out across the entire department to empower people really to understand what tools they should be employing in order to drive this change. And that has made a significant difference in the messaging that comes out from the people in our department around the new tools that we have at our disposal. And it's really enabled us to get a little further, I would say, in our initiatives.
Yeah. I'm just curious, given that you yourself were a practicing lawyer and then you kind of stepped into this field, as you say, almost by accident. How did you learn it all? How did you learn how to innovate or drive change?
Good question. I am a very avid reader and a continuous lifelong learner. So I threw myself into it with gusto. I read your blog all the time. I read every blog I can get my hands on in the industry. I have bookshelves overflowing with textbooks on innovation and change management and idea proliferation. And I've studied, I studied a course at Northwestern last year or earlier this year on product management, because I feel that product development is increasingly going to be vital in the legal industry. I'm doing my MBA in innovation and leadership. I'm almost finished, thank goodness, because it was quite a difficult thing to do. I've taken courses on design thinking and done workshops on design thinking. I have spoken to many, many people in the product industry and vendors at technology companies about how they design, how they come up with their ideas and then put those into fruition. I really, through learning, I recognize that I also couldn't just step into this kind of a role and innately understand what I was doing, who I was dealing with. And it was important to me in speaking increasingly to vendors across the industry, as well as to the attorneys, that I not just came across as knowledgeable, but was in fact knowledgeable about those topics. And then I tried to give that knowledge over to my team. So, and it's interesting how well that has worked. I think in our department, I would say that kind of culture of continuous learning is thriving. We support people who want to do further study, especially on topics that will support our department. We then ask them to provide synopses of those learnings to other people in the department. So we have people who have taken courses on effective presentations and communications, visual communications. We have people who have taken courses like me on design thinking. We have people who have skill sets that are quite different from the rest of our team that really stem from technology. So they can code, they can use Power BI at sort of expert level. And we get them to teach the rest of us, not to that same expert level, but sufficiently so that we're able to talk about those topics.
That's very inspiring to hear you describe that, and a good lesson for others to follow. You've talked several times about your team. What does your team look like? Who's on it? How big is it? What are they doing?
So our department as a whole is almost 50 people. It's spread across many different functions. I'll talk specifically about my side of the department, innovation and knowledge. So we have our research services team, which is the people who used to be called librarians. We now call them research analysts.
I like that.
Resource management. And then we have our practice innovation and knowledge attorneys. We have 10 of them. They support either, if it's international, an entire office or region of offices internationally, or within the States, they support particular practice groups. And they're responsible for knowledge and content curation, creation, collection, and delivery, but they are also responsible for identifying legal practice pain points, and working with our innovation and technology solutions team to run pilots and implement new technologies and to promote those technologies across the firm. And then I have the innovation and technology solutions team, which is made up of project managers and business analysts who are able to not just employ new technologies and liaise with IT to have those implemented at the firm, but who also are able to create bespoke technology solutions for discrete problems that arise within practice.
I'm always curious how you go about that process of identifying legal practice pain points. Do you have a process for that? How do you do that within your firm?
We speak to people. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I think that's something that people have lost a little bit, the importance of actually going out and speaking to your end users, the lawyers in this case, or when we do client work with the clients. So one of the things that I really encourage across the team is when you hear something that sounds like a problem, don't go away and try to solve it right away. Dig into that. Go and speak to the lawyers and understand exactly what it is that they're facing and why it's a problem and what that looks like. Speak to other people. And then we go out and we look at what a potential solution might be. And we continuously bring it back to the attorneys as well to make sense of what we're looking at and ensure that it really is a good fit for the problem we've identified. And sometimes we do this very deliberately on a broader scale. So sometimes, for example, when I got to the firm, looking at the tools that we had in our toolkit, I felt that the litigation department was perhaps somewhat underserved. And we actually ran a project to very deliberately go out and just speak and listen to the litigators across the firm and understand where they were seeing significant repetition, mundane work that was fairly standardized, where we obviously see opportunities for automation, what kinds of pain points they're facing with the current stable of tools and technology that they have, where processes might be improved. And this year before COVID, we had a grand plan of extending that beyond litigation. So that was successful. I mean, we developed a number of initiatives around the conversations that were had in that project. But this year, the plan was to go and do an extensive process mapping in person with many of the lawyers across the firm to really understand in detail what the life cycle of various matters looked like and where the pain points were within those life cycles so that we could apply new processes or new technologies appropriately. And we've done that to some extent. It's obviously a much harder exercise when everybody goes remote.
Yeah. I mean, that process mapping makes a lot of sense because it strikes me that a lot of practicing attorneys might not even recognize that something is a pain point. I mean, if they're not familiar with the technology and tools available to them, they may not even be thinking that there's a more efficient way to do something.
That's so interesting. And you would think that's true, and it is to some extent, but I've really had my eyes open recently. And one piece of advice I often give to people in the industry is don't underestimate your lawyers either. There is this refrain in the industry around lawyers being highly resistant to change, very skeptical, having this particular lawyer personality, which is true in some instances. We forget that they are also on a daily basis developing their own solutions to problems as part of their daily practice. And there is creativity there. So I think to some extent it's about educating your lawyers to understand what is possible with a technology. And once they have that understanding, it's much easier for them to identify the areas of their work that might lend themselves to automation. So one way that we've done that, for example, this year we rolled out a program called Legal Tech University in both the UK and with all of our summer associates in the US. And it's a program that we're going to extend more broadly across the firm and ultimately, ideally, with clients as well. And the idea behind this program really came up when I realized that very few law students are even now getting any kind of information or education at law school about changes in legal practice. About 50% of law schools across the states have courses around legal technology, but only about 15% of law students take those courses. And I won't go into detail, but I think this is partly a problem around the way that recruitment works in the United States. What I thought is this is not a problem that lies solely with law schools. It lies with law firms as well. It's then our responsibility to bring that education to the people who will be working as our future lawyers. So we developed a curriculum that really educated them on the business of law, the new competitive forces in the legal industry, and the new technologies available broadly in the industry, and then also specifically at Paul Hastings. And we partnered with a vendor called Brighter, which is a German company that I think is just fantastic. They provide extraordinary customer service. And it's an expert system, a decision tree automation tool that is completely no code. And we trained up all of the participants in Legal Tech University in both the UK and the US on using Brighter, and had them identify legal practice pain points by going out and speaking to attorneys during the program, and then develop a solution through a design session that occurred in the middle of the program, and then actually spend several weeks prototyping a solution within Brighter. And some of the ideas that have come out of that are exceptional, especially from the UK program, where some of the people involved in the program were associates who had been practicing for several years. And they really did identify areas where the firm, in inputting an automated solution, now stands to save millions of dollars, I would say, in what is otherwise unbilled time. And we're building out those modules as permanent fixtures in Brighter at the firm.
In this Legal Tech University that you're describing was one of the programs that was described in the application to ILTA for this peer award. And it was interesting to me that other examples of innovative and creative approaches that you're using at your firm and that you've helped develop are also focused on education, on educating around technology. If I understand it, you've got this 1 year internship opportunity for law school grads, which also kind of educates them around practice innovation. Is that right?
Yes. And so this is one of the initiatives that sits under the Paul Hastings Award, because this happens actually not in my area of responsibility, but the department offers 1 year internships to grads, especially at the moment from UCLA, because our managing partner, Greg Nitzkowski, graduated from UCLA. These are graduates who did well at law school, but were not picked up in the regular OCI recruitment process. And we provide them with a 1 year opportunity to work within our department and really learn about technology in practice, as well as do billable work for various different practice groups across the firm. So when they graduate from that internship, they actually are very well placed to pursue careers either in legal innovation or in substantive law, having had that year of Paul Hastings' work under their belt. You're right, Bob, that I think a lot of our programs do have to do with education, and it's not a mistake. I drafted a strategy on innovation for the firm, and the strategy revolves around a specific innovation pipeline that I call the 3 E's, which stand for education, engagement, and execution. And I've seen this work now several times, enough to understand that it really does work. In order to get people engaged in your programs and your initiatives, you have to educate them on why those are relevant, why it's important, why changing the way that you practice is at all necessary. Only once you've done that can you get people engaged in pilots and interested in developing ideas and solving problems in legal practice. And once you get them engaged in pilots and so on, they are your change agents because they've been involved in as part of the change from early on in the process. They understand the value in it. And through using them as your change agents, you're then able to execute on the change in a much more concrete manner and drive it more broadly across the firm and scale it up. So education is a core component of our strategy.
So I'm looking at as I mentioned, the application for Innovator of the Year, which I think you drafted, actually. It has your name on it. And I had asked ILTA if they could provide me any documentation as to how you were selected as Innovative Leader of the Year and whether there was a similar application form. And apparently it's a magical, secretive process that no one can explain to me. So this application form doesn't distinguish between programs, say, that you developed or that was developed by others in your department or on your team. But what else are you particularly proud of? What are other good examples of do you think, of programs that you've or initiatives that you've developed that relate to this award and this honor?
I think part of the reason there's a kind of magical process is that you have to be nominated by someone for the Innovative Leader Award, whereas as the Innovator of the Year for a law firm, you can self-nominate. But there still was an application. No, and I actually don't know. So, but I do know some of the projects that led to that award. One of them was Legal Tech University. Another was our broader application of Brighter across the firm and the way that it was brought in to solve a very pertinent a problem at the moment in law, which is the LIBOR remediation problem. About a year ago, actually more than a year ago now, we realized that this was going to be a significant impact on our financial clients. And I went to Legal Geek in the UK and was introduced to Brighter and saw the value in them as a tool that could be used in connection with Kira. It integrates with Kira, which is a tool that we already use with our transactional services center for due diligence purposes. The combination of those two tools provides a genuine end-to-end automation process for LIBOR repapering, which I think is entirely unique in the United States. And because we have our Transactional Services Center, which is effectively an internal ALSP, it allows us to provide an extremely effective, efficient service to clients who are in need of LIBOR remediation work entirely internally within the security of our firm's environment. Whereas I think a lot of other firms have gone out to partner with external consultants, for example, to get this work done. So that was one of the initiatives that I do feel really proud of. We have some extraordinary lawyers who focus on LIBOR work, and they're now working with this end-to-end process to really solve that problem for our clients.
And again, according to the application, it says that as a result of the development of this innovative offering, the firm's partners have been successful in pitching for LIBOR repapering work from multiple financial clients. So that's a good thing. Are there other examples that you would like to point to or mention?
I think one of the primary things that is the basis of this award is the way that I run the team. So I realized last year as well that because we had become such a large team, there was not the kind of communication happening across it that really benefits everybody. And I always try to bring in methodologies from outside of legal to benefit our teams where possible, because I think in many other industries, they've been able to push the dial a little further in terms of innovation. It makes sense to look at those types of successes and import them into our legal environments where possible. So I've instituted agile meetings across our teams on a very regular basis, just 15-minute meetings where people share the initiatives they're working on, the tools they're using, anything new that's come up that would be of interest to other people on the team. And it's enabled us to take something that is quite small and then scale it up dramatically across practices at the firm. So another example of that is what we call the Keyword Relevancy Report, which is a solution that the department came up with. My practice innovation and knowledge attorney colleague, Mike Ertel, supports the IP practices. And they specifically indicated that they were getting these alerts from one of the courts that really were not very useful to them. And I think this is something that many people will understand is a problem across not just IP practices, but any area of law where there are many alerts that are sent, but they're not particularly targeted with relevancy to exactly what the lawyers need to understand. Yeah. And we worked with one of our business analysts to develop a tool that was able to go out and scrape the website, compare what was found against keywords developed by the associates, and then automatically trigger emails to the group that were very targeted and really indicated exactly which of the cases they needed to read right now and be on top of. And in fact, those alerts come to them not just in a more targeted, useful manner, but also quicker than the ones from the court. And we've now, because of the agile meetings, been able to take that and reuse it across many practices at the firm, turning it into something that is quite transformational. Another thing I would say is, we've implemented design principles from design thinking around user-first methodologies in every single instance. And we've really scaled up our client-facing work so that we're able to provide technology development, process improvement, and technology implementation advisory work to our clients. But I know that one other thing is the fact that I created this group, LID, which stands for Legal Innovation and Design, which is a broader industry group intended to support people who, like me, are responsible for driving innovation across commercial legal environments. And so the award is intended to honor people who successfully drive the use of legal technology, not just within their law firm, but in the industry at large.
Yeah, and I know you have, in addition to LID, I know you have your own blog as well. You mentioned earlier that you read lots of blogs, but you're writing your own blog, Tower of Babel, I believe is the name.
Yes.
What's the significance of that name? What are you focusing on in your blog?
One of the things that interests me enormously is the way that legal technology is evolving across the world. And the blog arose because I felt frustrated that, especially when one is situated in the US, most of the information that we get about how this is unfolding is very specific to the big markets, the US, the UK. I started talking to many people who were in smaller markets and perhaps had clients who speak many different languages. And it became clear that it's a real problem for them. For example, I spoke to a Baltic law firm at the beginning of last year at the Law Without Walls event at the University of Miami. And they have clients who need to be served in 5 different languages. And for them to find technology that actually works and is able to serve clients in many different languages is incredibly challenging. So the blog is a reference to the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, and intended to sort of, in a slightly tongue-in-cheek way, reference the difficulty in law with the fact that while this legal technology is proliferating supposedly for the benefit of pulling us all together in a more united, more efficient manner, in fact, the way it's unfolding in the very large markets in a kind of monolingual manner is in some ways having the opposite effect. It's reducing efficacy for markets that are underserved by these legal technology vendors, who obviously stand to make the most money in the largest markets that tend to be English speaking. So that was the genesis of it. But Bob, one thing that I will mention is that I and my husband, Chris Ford, have actually been hard at work for the past year on a side project, which
I was going to ask you about
that.
I saw your interview with Caroline last week.
which hopes to reduce that problem to some extent for law firms across the globe.
Well, tell us about it.
So it's a company that we are hoping to launch within the next month called Legal Tech Hub, which is really just an incredibly detailed repository of legal technology tools across the entire world, in every single market, and data points around those tools that enable a user to search in a very nuanced manner for exactly what they're looking for and what they need. So if what you need as a law firm or as a client is a tool that, for example, functions in Polish and does document automation, you'll be able to find it on Legal Tech Hub. If you want to see all of the AI tools that serve Brazil, you'll be able to find that very easily. So we think it's a tool that will be equally useful to people in the US and the UK and the bigger markets, as well as to smaller markets across the world. And unlike most of the directories that are out there today, it does have this incredibly nuanced search across it. It also will be up to date. So we've committed to maintaining it on a monthly basis.
God bless you on that. That will be quite a task.
I know. Yeah. I know. And I know, Bob, that you have also a directory which is deep on your site.
Deep, but very much out of date, I think, at this point. I know I'm way out of date on it, and it's very hard to maintain. There's just so much going on.
There's so much happening. And even since we've started collecting data, of course, many tools some have died, many have been acquired by others. Yeah. So we have an area for consolidations. Yeah. And an area that we call the graveyard for tools who have sadly passed. Because what we also realized is that when we started collecting this data, it could be quite useful from a research perspective as well. Over time, we hope that we'll begin to see trends around the kinds of tools that are not making it in certain regions, or the kinds of consolidations that are happening in the market. And so that has been really fun. And we will be adding additional directories around events in legal technology and legal innovation around the world, the award programs that happen, because it can be really difficult to keep track of those. And also on consultants who work in this space across the world. Yeah,
I think that historical perspective can be really valuable. Having been around long enough to have some of that, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a company start up something professing to be the first at something, and of course they weren't the first at something, and others have come and gone in that same area. And sometimes companies just either haven't done their market research or just haven't had a resource like what you're describing to do that kind of research. So I think that could be really valuable. So Legal Tech Hub, we'll watch for that. What did you say, in a month or so? Or?
Yeah, we're hoping to launch in September. It may be early October, but we'll see. There's always more to do at the end than one expects.
I know it.
I'm learning.
Hey, I wanted to ask, I know we're running long here, but you've talked a couple of times about COVID-19 and the impact of the pandemic. What has been the impact of that on you in your department, in your firm? I mean, have you refocused your priorities, rethought your priorities, shelved some products, or fast tracked other projects? Or
I mean, I think this is probably a similar refrain to what others have said. It's been, in some ways, a positive thing for professionals like us in law firms, and there are a number of reasons for that. One, of course, is that immediately we saw uptake of certain tools, for example, e-signatures, where in certain practices, even the regulators were resisting going electronic. And now, of course, everyone has to. So that changed very quickly. The take-up of any collaboration tools or video technology that enables people to stay connected while remote was immediate and quick. But I think it goes much broader than that. What we've seen, ironically, is increased connection across practice groups, across departments, because there's no longer the opportunity of just running into someone in the hallway. You have to make those opportunities happen. And so, and in addition to that, unlike almost any other change in the law that has happened since I've been practicing, certainly, mostly those changes affect one practice area at a time, or perhaps several in different ways. But COVID came along, and suddenly there were changes in the law across every single practice group that were relevant to their clients in different ways. And so we saw working groups of lawyers cross-practice really discussing the law in quite a deep way, and the impact and the interpretation. And there's almost a flurry of excitement, I would describe it, in the way that happened. It's this sort of intellectual reawakening. In our research services department, we were tracking 2,300 or something pieces of legislation immediately for all of the changes that were happening. Yeah. And the way that's borne out for us, we sat down, and I really need to give credit to Amy Wagner on this one. We really sat down as a department to look at what are the changes that are happening, which of those are very positive changes, and how, and what can we do to enshrine those changes on an ongoing basis in the way that we work.
That's really fascinating. So, I mean, when you talk about increased connections, it sounds like you're saying there's kind of more intentionality and less kind of randomness. I mean, you're not just running into people in the hallway, but you're making a point. Not you personally, but I mean, people in the firm are making a point of reaching out and connecting and talking about things.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Wow. And so, how do we preserve the momentum around this? How do we, to the extent there is this bright side around so much suffering and tragedy, I hate to say, but to the extent there is this bright side around it within, at least within the innovation community, how do we keep that momentum going as we begin to come out of this pandemic, assuming we begin to come out of this pandemic?
I think that's a really difficult question. And I have so much respect for organizations like Linklaters, for example, that are already taking really big steps to change things dramatically on an ongoing basis. I think that's very difficult to do. And the organizations that are forward-looking like that and making those changes should be commended for that. One thing, Bob, I have to mention this because I have used this quote and attributed you every time, but you said, I think, one of the wisest things when COVID hit, which was that lawyers used to regard technology as something almost to fear. But when COVID hit, due to remote work, it became their lifeline. It completely changed the way that they viewed technology and legal work. And that, I think, is something that might be here to stay. It doesn't mean adoption will be easy from now on, but it does mean we have a window in which to really lock in this sense that technology is our friend, not our foe. And I guess one way that we have tried to make use of that is when there was a downturn in work briefly during this period, to use that downturn to explore functionalities more broadly in the tools that our lawyers had available to us, to institute increasing numbers of training sessions that were enormously well attended compared to in regular life, and to drive ahead on certain initiatives. So that's one way that we've been locking it in. We've also made more permanent some of the initiatives that arose out of COVID. So where there were groups of partners meeting and parts of our team were included in those discussions, we've made sure that we continue to be a part of those discussions now on an ongoing basis so that there is more connection. We also had created an entire site very quickly, which I think most firms did, to pull together all COVID resources collectively in one place and to send out newsletters highlighting those resources. And we're continuing to do that, but gradually it's turning into more of a newsletter about broader resources across the firm rather than just COVID specific. And it's getting more take up than previous communications used to. So these may all sound like small things, but in fact, they represent a change in mindset across the firm, which I see as something that's really positive.
Well, now that Nikki Shaver has quoted me back to myself, I feel like I should retire and hang it up and go move to the Caribbean or something. I've been asking you lots of questions. Anything else that you'd like to say or point out or comment on? What else are you thinking about?
One thing that I think is important that everyone knows, I believe so strongly in cross-vertical collaboration to effect change in the legal industry. It's really vital that all of us work together on this sort of effort. It's not something that can be done just from within a law firm or just from a law school or just at a vendor. I think to the extent that anyone has any power at all to pull together people from different groups across the legal industry and collectively work towards the betterment of the legal industry, that's what's going to increase the pace of change. And that's what I really fervently believe in and have been trying to do with a lot of the initiatives that I've instigated or become involved in. I know it sounds incredibly kumbaya, but I really believe that you can't do this on your own. It has to be a collective effort.
Absolutely. Good advice and good thoughts. Nikki, I could have talked to you for 2 hours. So many more topics I would get to here, but we need to call it quits. And I really appreciate your taking the time to be on the show, and a huge congratulations to you and to your firm for these honors. Much deserved.
Thank you so much for having me, Bob. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
It's been a pleasure for me as well. And as always, I'd like to give a thanks to Ben Ambrogi and Populous Radio for producing and editing this show. Thanks to all of you for listening. That's it for this week. This is Bob Ambrogi.